The elegant dining room of the Harrison family mansion had always made me feel like a guest at someone else's table, especially tonight. Across from me sat my sister, Emma, effortlessly poised in a designer dress, swirling wine in her crystal glass like she owned the world. Our monthly family dinners had become less about family and more about performance, Emma's performance specifically. "So Sarah," she began, her voice thick with fox curiosity, "still running that little vintage shop downtown?" Her tone sliced like a knife cloaked in velvet. I took a slow sip of water, forcing a smile. If only she knew. "Yes, Emma," I replied calmly. "Still there." My parents exchanged their usual look, a mix of disappointment and pity. In their eyes, I was the daughter who abandoned a promising finance career to play dress up with old clothes. They'd never known the real reason I opened that little shop, and I hadn't corrected them. You see, that shop was never the dream. It was the cover, behind the cash register and the racks of curated vintage couture. I was building something else, something that required silence, discretion, and a lot of patience. Something neither Emma nor my parents would ever suspect. Emma, of course, basked in the glow of their approval. "My tech startup is really taking off," she announced, casually brushing invisible lint off her sleeve. "We've got a meeting with a major investor tomorrow. One of those Silicon Valley types. They say she practically owns half the tech world." She paused, letting that land. "The kind of success you could have had if you hadn't dropped out of your MBA program," she added with a smile so sweet it hurt my teeth. I kept my expression neutral. I wanted to laugh, because the mysterious investor Emma was preparing to pitch to tomorrow was me. Not Sarah, the family failure. Not the woman who ran a quaint boutique. But Alexandra Stone, the enigmatic founder of Vertex Ventures, a private equity firm with $12 billion under management and a name that carried weight in every boardroom in Silicon Valley. Alexandra Stone didn't do public appearances. Her identity was closely guarded, her photo never leaked, her background a blank slate. It had taken years to build the myth, but it worked. And tomorrow, Emma would walk into my office, clueless. Emma leaned in with that glint in her eyes. "They say Alexandra is brilliant, ruthless. Nobody even knows what she looks like. Total mystery." "The name sounds familiar," I said softly, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. "You wouldn't know. You're too busy arranging second-hand handbags to care about the tech world." My mother jumped in, ever the peacekeeper. "Emma, maybe we talk about something else? Sarah's shop is quaint. She seems happy." Quaint. As if I were a harmless old woman who spent her days arranging doilies. They had no idea the scale of what I'd built. Emma, of course, couldn't let it go. "When I'm running a billion-dollar company, everyone will know my name. I'm not hiding behind some pseudonym like Stone." I excused myself to the bathroom, needing air. As soon as I closed the door, my phone buzzed. "Michael, assistant. Final background checks on Harrison Tech complete. Several red flags in their financials." Me. "Meeting still on. I want to hear their pitch." Back at the table, Emma was showing off her startup's website on a tablet. "We've already got interest from serious players. Tomorrow's pitch is basically a formality." I stared at the screen. Flashy UI. All buzzwords, no substance. I'd already spotted the cracks: unoriginal algorithms, inflated growth projections, shallow market research. "It looks interesting," I offered, keeping my tone neutral. "Interesting?" Her voice rose. "It's revolutionary. But of course. What would you know? You sell old clothes." I smiled sweetly. "Actually, I just acquired a rare 1956 Hermes Kelly bag. Belonged to a former tech executive. He lost everything after making some very bad investments." Emma missed the warning in my words. She was too busy dreaming out loud about private jets, a mansion in Pacific Heights, and perhaps a yacht. "Don't worry," she said, patting my arm. "After I get the investment, maybe I'll let you handle my dry cleaning." I hugged my parents goodbye, enduring one last round of pity and unsolicited advice about returning to finance. As I walked to my modest Audi, my Bentley was parked at home, I couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow, Emma would walk into my office, ready to impress her mystery investor. Tomorrow, she would meet Alexandra Stone. And tomorrow, she'd find out that the woman she'd belittled for years, the one they all thought was a failure, was the one holding her future in her hands. The next morning, I arrived at Vertex Ventures headquarters 2 hours before the meeting, The towering glass building downtown, sleek, modern, intimidating, was entirely owned by a web of shell companies that all traced back to me, Alexandra Stone, a name that had become almost mythical in Silicon Valley. I rode the private elevator to the top floor, my office, spanning the entire level, overlooking the glittering San Francisco Bay. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows for a moment, breathing in the silence before the storm. Everything in my office was curated for power and privacy. Minimalist furniture, subtle lighting, modern art designed to keep my face partially in shadow. No press photos, no leaks. Alexandra Stone was an enigma, and today, that mystique would serve me well. Miss Stone, Michael, my assistant, said as he stepped inside. The Harrison tech team has arrived. They're 30 minutes early. Of course they were. Emma had probably insisted on it. Let them wait in the conference room, I said, adjusting the cuffs of my charcoal Tom Ford suit. I wore subtle Bulgari jewelry, hair pinned in a sleek chignon, and non-prescription glasses, another layer between Sarah and the identity I'd created. And Michael, I added, make sure the cameras are recording. I want everything documented. He nodded and left. 15 minutes later, I stood behind one-way glass watching Emma pace nervously in the conference room. She was dressed to impress, her designer outfit crisp and expensive, but she kept smoothing her skirt as if unsure of herself. She wasn't alone. Her CTO, their CFO, and to my surprise, our father sat at the long conference table. My stomach twisted. Of course he came. Emma was his star. He never missed her big moments. I wondered if he'd even recognize my voice, distorted and masked by lighting. Probably not. He hadn't really seen me in years. I waited 7 more minutes, long enough to make a point, then walked in through the private entrance. The shift in the room was instant. Emma's dazzling smile faltered slightly as I entered. Good morning, I said, keeping my voice deliberately low and smooth. I'm Alexandra Stone. Please, have a seat. Our father leaned forward, squinting at me. His expression flickered. Was that recognition? No, surely not. I remained in the shadows. Emma sat upright, her voice slightly higher than usual. Miss Stone, thank you for meeting with us. We're incredibly excited to present Harrison Tech's revolutionary AI platform. I nodded once. I'm listening. She launched into the pitch, polished, practiced, but full of holes. Slides filled the screen, market share projections, flashy visuals, grand promises. They claimed their AI platform could predict market trends with 99% accuracy. That they'd triple revenue in 2 years. That they just needed a $50 million investment to dominate the market. I watched her, quiet and still. She had no idea I already knew the truth. I had reviewed every financial statement, every line of code. I'd seen the algorithm they built, and I knew exactly where they got it. When she finished, she smiled triumphantly. Any questions? A long pause. Then I leaned forward slightly. Several, I said. Let's start with your algorithm. The one you claim predicts market behavior with 99% accuracy. Yes, Emma said, beaming. It's completely proprietary. Interesting, I said, tapping my tablet. Because I'm looking at the technical specs, and they seem remarkably similar to a pattern recognition model published 3 years ago by a research lab in Switzerland. In fact, I tapped again. Here's a side-by-side comparison. They're almost identical. Silence. The color drained from Emma's face. Her co-founder suddenly found his shoes very interesting. That's a coincidence, she stammered. Like how your market analysis ignores 3 major competitors. I asked, standing up. Or how your financial projections assume growth that no tech firm in your space has ever achieved. Our father spoke up, confused and defensive. Now see here, Miss Stone. No, Mr. Harrison. I cut in, circling the table. You see here. I stopped at the end of the table, turning toward them. Your daughter's company is a house of cards. Inflated metrics, copied code, overhyped promises wrapped in buzzwords. Emma's lips trembled. You don't understand, actually. I understand perfectly. I reached up and removed my glasses. Then I stepped fully into the light. Our father's jaw slackened. Emma blinked in disbelief. Sarah, he whispered. Surprise, I said coolly. The woman you've spent the last 2 years trying to impress? The investor you bragged about at dinner last night? That's me. The failure of a sister who runs a little shop. She's the one deciding whether to save your company or let it fall apart. Emma shot to her feet, her chair skidding backward. This is a joke. You're nothing. You sell vintage clothes? No, Emma, I said. I run a $12 billion firm. I've invested in 37 successful tech companies. The vintage shop? That's my hobby. Our father's voice was faint. How? Remember when I left Goldman Sachs? I asked. You thought I was having a breakdown. In reality, I developed an algorithm that outperformed anything in the market. I left, traded on my own, and built Vertex Ventures from scratch. Emma's face had crumbled. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. And by the way, I added, those trends you've been citing in your reports? You got them from one of my subsidiaries' public data models. I recognized the phrasing. She slumped back in her seat. Mascara starting to run. You brought us here to humiliate me, she whispered. No, I said, returning to my seat. I brought you here because you need a reality check. The room sat in stunned silence. Emma stared at the table, her hands clenched in her lap. Our father, usually so vocal, so sure, looked completely unmoored. I slid a thick folder across the table. I'm giving you a choice. Emma flinched, but didn't touch it. Option 1, I continued calmly. I walk away. I go public with what I know: your flawed tech, your copied algorithm, your exaggerated financials. You'll be lucky to get a cease and desist letter before investors. Sue for fraud. Emma's breath hitched. Option 2, I said. You take a much smaller investment, 5 million, not 50, but with strict oversight, a new board, technical advisors I trust, and you step down as CEO. Her head shot up. What? You want to take my company? No, I want you to save it, I said evenly. But you're not ready to run it. Not yet. You built a castle out of sand. I'm giving you the chance to rebuild it on stone. Our father opened the folder with shaking fingers, eyes scanning the pages. You'd really still invest? He asked quietly. After everything? I turned to him. Because it's still a good idea underneath all the hype. The problem is, Emma wanted the spotlight more than she wanted the substance. Emma wiped at her mascara with the back of her hand. Why didn't you ever say anything? She said in a small voice. You let me sit there and mock you, humiliate you for years. You weren't ready to hear it, I said softly. You only saw the surface of everything. Of me, of business, of success. She looked broken now, raw, exposed. No designer armor left to hide behind. For the first time in years, she looked like my little sister again. Just a girl who wanted to matter. I don't know what to do, she whispered. You start by accepting that what got you here isn't enough to get you further, I said. Then you decide if you're ready to learn. We spent the next hour reviewing her company's actual capabilities. I pointed out every shortcoming in their tech and showed her the competitors already eating up market share. I offered 3 strategies to pivot. Her CTO, once smug, was now scribbling notes frantically. Emma didn't say much, but her posture shifted. Less defensive, more humble. As they prepared to leave, our father lingered behind. Sarah, he said quietly. I don't know what to say. I looked at him, not the business giant he thought he was, but just a father who'd never really seen one of his daughters. You don't have to say anything, I replied. Just, maybe stop assuming success only looks one way. He nodded slowly. You were always so quiet. I guess I thought you didn't want the spotlight. I didn't, I said. But that doesn't mean I wasn't building something. In the dark, Emma turned to me at the elevator. Her voice was low, sincere. If I do this the right way, will you help me? I studied her for a moment. Then I smiled. I will. But only if you're ready to listen and unlearn a few things. She gave a small nod. Okay. As they left, Michael turned to me. That went better than I expected. I raised an eyebrow. Did it? He grinned. For them? Not at first. For you? That's another story. Later that evening, I returned to my vintage shop. It was quiet, warm, and smelled faintly of lavender and old books. I walked through the racks, touching silks and tweeds that had outlasted empires. This place grounded me, reminded me why I had started all of this. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma. I'm sorry for everything. Will you really teach me? I stared at the screen, 1,000 childhood memories rushing back. Forts in the living room, matching pajamas, the way she used to follow me around asking questions. Come by the shop tomorrow, I replied. We'll start with what success really looks like. The bell over the door jingled softly as Emma stepped into my vintage shop the next morning. She looked different, less polished, less composed. No designer heels or statement handbag today. Just jeans, flats, and a nervous kind of humility in her posture. I glanced up from steaming a 1940-second silk dress. You came. She gave a small smile. You told me to. I hung the dress carefully. I told you to come if you were ready to learn. Emma glanced around the shop. It's peaceful here. It's honest, I said. Every piece in here tells a story. You can't fake vintage. Either it lasts, or it doesn't. She moved slowly between the racks, running her fingers along the fabrics. I never asked why you opened this place. I always thought it was just your retreat. It was, I said, but it was also cover while I built my firm. This shop gave me the space to stay invisible, to grow without scrutiny. She picked up a beaded clutch and turned it over. And now it keeps me grounded, I replied. Running vertex comes with pressure, noise, ego. This place reminds me who I was before all that. She looked at me, then really looked. I don't think I ever knew who you were. I was so busy chasing my own version of success, I didn't stop to ask what yours looked like. I nodded slowly. That's what I want you to understand. Success isn't about applause or headlines. It's about legacy. Emma set down the clutch. How do I rebuild my company? First, I said, you step down as CEO. She flinched. But you're not ready yet. Take a product director role. Learn the tech. Sit with engineers. Get your hands dirty. You've been pitching from the clouds without ever walking the ground. She swallowed hard but nodded. Second, we rework your board. I'll assign a mentor, someone tough. She won't care about your ideas unless you have data and execution to back them. Emma raised an eyebrow. I smiled. You'll see. She hesitated, then said softly, and third, I said, you stop comparing your path to anyone else's, especially mine. Emma let out a long breath, like she'd been holding it for years. I think I can do that. That afternoon, we sat in the back office and dissected her product roadmap. I poked holes in her timelines. She asked real questions for the first time without ego. And when she didn't know something, she admitted it. Progress? Over the next few weeks, the change was real. Emma showed up to every mentoring session. On time. She started shadowing engineers, asking good questions. The more she learned, the less she talked and the more people respected her. Our father, though, struggled. You're really not mad? He asked me over Sunday dinner. I admitted. But I stopped needing your approval a long time ago. He looked down at his plate. We were wrong about you. You weren't wrong, I said. You just weren't looking. He nodded slowly. You're an incredible woman, Sarah. I smiled faintly. I always was. You just never saw past Emma's spotlight. That night, as I locked up the shop, I noticed something on the counter, a small vintage notebook. Inside was a note in Emma's handwriting. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I promise not to waste it. I traced the writing with my finger. The old Emma would have bought her way out of failure. The new Emma was learning to earn her way into success. There was still a long road ahead. But for the first time, it wasn't a competition. It was a collaboration. And that made all the difference. 6 months had passed since Emma's pitch meeting turned into a reckoning and a rebirth. A lot had changed since then. She had taken my offer seriously, stepping down as CEO and enrolling in a crash course in machine learning. She worked 12-hour days under her new mentor, a former CTO of a company I'd invested in. Her product updates were now grounded in real tech, not wishful thinking, and she hadn't once asked for applause. One Friday afternoon, she stopped by the vintage shop holding a bouquet of sunflowers. You're impossible to buy for, she said, placing them on the counter. So I figured flowers were safe. I smiled, brushing my hands off on a linen apron. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She looked around the shop, at the soft lamplight bouncing off sequins and silk. I get it now, you know why you love it here. It's quiet, I said. Real. She nodded. And it makes people feel something. That weekend, we hosted the first ever private event at the shop, a small gathering of female founders I had personally invested in over the years. I asked Emma to speak, to share what it meant to let go of ego and rebuild. She did, with honesty, vulnerability, and more humility than I thought possible 6 months ago. My parents were there, sitting in the front row. My mother clutched her pearls when Emma introduced me, the woman who taught me that success doesn't shout, it just works. Afterward, my father approached me. You're not just successful, he said, voice rough. You're significant. That meant more than any headline. Speaking of headlines, the media had finally connected the dots. A Bloomberg columnist published a piece speculating that Alexandra Stone and the mysterious owner of Vertex Ventures was the same woman who ran a quaint vintage store in the Mission District. We neither confirmed nor denied it. Let the myth grow. Besides, the shop had never been about recognition. It was where I went to remember who I was before the billion-dollar meetings. It kept me grounded in elegance and story, in threads that had stood the test of time. Just like me, Emma now visited the shop often not as a rival or a skeptic, but as a student, a sister, a co-creator of a new kind of legacy. One afternoon, she helped me style a 1950 seconds Dior gown on a mannequin and said, "Do you think one day I'll leave behind something as beautiful as this?" I looked at her, at the sister who once mocked me, now standing quietly in the light of her own transformation. "You already are," I said.